Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to talk about things that are rarely discussed in churches and sermons. We know the names of the 12 apostles, we know about their great mission and miracles. But what happened to them afterwards? How did their lives turn out? How did they meet their final hour? The answers to these questions aren't just historical facts. They are stories of incredible faith, courage, and devotion, stories worthy of being heard, stories that make you think, what am I willing to do for my beliefs? And today, we will walk this path together, from the first to the last of the 12. Let's start with probably the most famous and, perhaps, the most revered of the apostles, Peter. Peter, the very one who denied Christ 3 times, but then atoned for his denial for the rest of his life. After Jesus' ascension, Peter became a pillar of the early church. He preached with great power and performed miracles. But he had to pay the ultimate price for this. During Emperor Nero's persecutions of Christians in Rome, Peter was arrested and sentenced to death by crucifixion. According to tradition, Peter considered himself unworthy to die in the same way as his teacher and asked his executioners to crucify him upside down. His request was granted. Imagine this picture: an old, no longer young man who had come a long way from a simple fisherman to the founder of the church, voluntarily choosing a more agonizing death out of his humility and faith. This is not just an execution, it's an act of the greatest self-sacrifice and devotion. The conclusion here is obvious. True faith can transform a person beyond recognition. The one who once faltered before a servant girl now looks death in the face with incredible humility and strength. And his death became not the end, but the beginning of a legend that has inspired millions of people for 2,000 years. But if Peter symbolizes humility, then the Apostle Paul, who, although not one of the original 12 apostles, whose fate is inextricably linked with them, embodies unyielding fortitude. Paul, the former persecutor of Christians named Saul, went through an incredible journey and became the most zealous preacher of the gospel. His life was full of dangers, beatings, prisons, and travels. In the end, he too ended up in Rome during Nero's time. But unlike Peter, Paul was a Roman citizen, which meant crucifixion was forbidden for him. He was beheaded with a sword. This seems like a quicker and less painful death, but think about it. Paul, until the very last moment, continued to write his epistles, instruct communities, and preach even to his jailers. He used every opportunity to spread the word. His death was instantaneous, but his path to it was long and full of hardship. The conclusion from Paul's story is this: strength of spirit and faithfulness to one's mission are more important than the method of execution itself. He didn't just die. He finished his course. As he himself said, he kept the faith. And his legacy, his epistles, became the cornerstone of all Christian theology. From Paul's unyielding faith, let's move to a story that strikes with its tragedy and, if you think about it, seems almost unfair. Now let's talk about one of the most mysterious apostles, James, son of Zebedee, brother of John. He went down in history as the first of the 12 to suffer a martyr's death, and his execution is described in the Acts of the Apostles very succinctly. King Herod Agrippa killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Just a few words, no details, no great speeches before the execution, no lengthy confrontation with the authorities, just an arrest and a quick execution. Why is this important? Because the death of James shows that martyrdom in Christianity wasn't always a grand spectacle with a battle against lions in the arena. It was often quiet, quick, and administrative. James, unlike Peter or Paul, didn't have time to make a loud career as a preacher. He didn't write epistles. His mission was cut short at the very start, but his death became a signal to the other apostles that the persecutions were serious and long-term. The conclusion from this short but bitter story is, faithfulness unto death is not always spectacular. Sometimes it's a quiet and quick acceptance of one's fate without the chance to say a final word or address the flock. And such faithfulness perhaps requires no less, if not more, courage. From this almost unnoticeable yet pivotal death, let's turn our gaze to the apostle whose story is shrouded in the most mysterious and even mystical legends. And of course, we cannot ignore the most enigmatic apostle, Judas Iscariot. Yes, he wasn't a martyr in the traditional sense, but his death is an integral and tragic part of this overall story. After his betrayal, Judas, as we know from Scripture, could not bear the weight of what he had done. He tried to return the silver coins, and when that didn't help, he went and hanged himself. This is a death from despair, shame, and hopelessness. It is the complete opposite of the death of Peter or Paul. They died, parting with earthly life, but with hope and faith. Judas departed in complete darkness, without hope. His story is a terrible warning that even closeness to the truth does not guarantee salvation if betrayal and pride live in the heart. The conclusion here is very harsh. The consequences of sin can be so unbearable that death seems like the only way out. But it is a way out to nowhere. Comparing the death of Judas and the other apostles, we see two radically different models of departing from life. One with faith and redemption, the other with despair and self-destruction. And this difference makes us think about what really happened to the other disciples, whose fates are not described in such detail in the canonical texts. What about the other apostles? Their stories have come down to us mainly through traditions and apocryphal texts, but they are no less impressive for it. Thomas, whom we call the Doubter, according to tradition, reached India with his preaching. There he founded Christian communities and was executed pierced by spears for converting the wife and relative of a local king to Christ. Matthew, the tax collector, author of the first gospel, preached in Ethiopia, and according to one tradition, was executed by beheading with a sword. Philip, it is said, was crucified upside down in Hierapolis, similar to Peter. Bartholomew preached in Armenia, and according to one of the most gruesome versions, was flayed alive and then beheaded. James, son of Alphaeus, was thrown from the temple wall in Jerusalem and finished off with a blow from a club to the head. Simon the Zealot, according to various versions, was crucified in Britain or sawn apart with a saw in Persia. Jude Thaddeus, also known as Judas, son of James, was killed by arrows. John, son of Zebedee, brother of James, the only one who died a natural death in old age, but he also knew persecutions, was thrown into boiling oil, but miraculously survived and was exiled to the island of Patmos. So it turns out that out of the 12, only John escaped a violent death. 11 people suffered a martyr's death for their faith. This is a staggering statistic. So what do we see when we look at all these 12 destinies? We see not just a group of followers of some teacher. We see people who were willing to go all the way. Their lives after the ascension are not a story of glory and honor. It is a story of persecution, prisons, exiles, and terrible executions. They didn't receive money or power for their preaching. They only received the opportunity to die for the one in whom they believed. And this fact is perhaps one of the strongest arguments in favor of the truth of their testimony. Agree, people can give their lives for an idea if they are sincerely mistaken. But all 12, 11 out of 12, they saw the risen Christ. They communicated with him after the execution, and they knew that death was not the end. It was this knowledge that gave them that superhuman strength of spirit which we cannot help but acknowledge when looking at their fates. So what do these stories mean for you personally? Are they just ancient legends, or are they an example of incredible faith capable of changing the world? These people changed the history of mankind. They were not rulers or generals. They were simple fishermen, tax collectors, ordinary people. But their conviction and willingness to die for the truth laid the foundation for the civilization in which we live. Think for a minute. What are you willing to do for your beliefs? Are you ready to stand up for your faith, your principles, when your peace of mind, your reputation, or perhaps something more is at stake? The story of the apostles is not a call to martyrdom. It is a call to courage. the courage to live by your convictions every day in big and small things. If this material made you think, if you want to understand the history of Christianity more deeply, the foundations of faith, or simply explore the amazing twists and turns of human destinies, subscribe to our channel.